three identical figures stood in mid-air, greeting each other. The scene was undeniably strange, but to Jiuyo and the others, it was more about shock than anything else. They could all sense it. The auras of the three figures were nearly identical, and their power was equally matched. If it weren't for their different colored clothes, they might not even be able to distinguish the true Mu Chun from the others. This is equivalent to 3 lower Earth Supremes. Jiuyo muttered in astonishment. To transform into 3. If anyone were to challenge Mu Chun in the future, they wouldn't just face one Mu Chun, but 3. And if these 3 Mu Chuns teamed up, their combined power would undoubtedly be far greater than any other 3 lower Earth Supremes joining forces. After all, no coordination could rival that of Mu Chuns. Among the 3, their minds were connected, there was no distinction between them, and their cooperation was seamless. Truly legendary divine abilities. The name is well-deserved. Jiuyo couldn't help but sigh and envied as they marveled. Mu Chun himself was equally amazed as he gazed at his 2 avatars. This was no mere spiritual shadow formed by spiritual energy. From a certain perspective, these 2 avatars were as real as any living person, possessing Mu Chun's full strength and unlimited potential. However, despite this, there was a clear hierarchy among the 3. Mu Chun himself was the main body, while the 2 avatars, though independent, existed to enhance his power and sustain his existence. After all, avatars could be destroyed, but if Mu Chun's true body were erased, the avatars would vanish as well. As Mu Chun marveled at his avatars, the figure of the Heavenly Emperor appeared beside him. He glanced at the 2 avatars, shaking his head slightly. Although you've successfully created avatars, they're still somewhat unstable. It seems you'll need to nurture them for a while longer. Mu Chun nodded somewhat embarrassingly. After all, his success in cultivating the One Chi transforms 3 purities method was mainly due to receiving the Heavenly Emperor's true spirit baptism. While it allowed for rapid progress, it came with its flaws. The avatars weren't initially stable. From now on, place your avatars at the bottom of the Heavenly River. While cultivating in its depths, you can also stabilize their foundation, the Heavenly Emperor suggested, pointing to the Heavenly River below. Mu Chun was momentarily stunned. After all, the Heavenly River was located in the ancient Heavenly Palace, and the space it occupied was unstable. Once they left, finding it again would be difficult. As if he understood Mu Chun's thoughts, the Heavenly Emperor smiled and handed him the ancient Heavenly Emperor's sword. As long as you wield the Heavenly Emperor's sword, you can enter the ancient Heavenly Palace at will and control this space. Mu Chun was taken aback. He hadn't expected the Heavenly Emperor to grant him control over the ancient Heavenly Palace. Though the palace was now devoid of life, its heritage was still terrifyingly powerful. Apart from the many relics left behind, the Heavenly River alone beneath his feet would make many powerful factions covet it. Moreover, within the ancient Heavenly Palace, there was an extraordinary presence. That was the Scripture Pavilion. That was the true heritage of the ancient Heavenly Palace. Any faction that could acquire the ancient Heavenly Palace, if not destroyed by envy along the way, would have an extraordinary future. Given the immense value of the ancient Heavenly Palace, Mu Chun was deeply moved by the Heavenly Emperor's gesture. For a moment, he hesitated to take the sword, his mind racing. Was the Heavenly Emperor planning for him to restore the ancient Heavenly Palace? If so, he was willing to contribute. After all, the opportunity granted to him by the Heavenly Emperor was far too important. Such great kindness must be repaid. But just as Mu Chun was lost in thought, the Heavenly Emperor smiled again and said, "The ancient Heavenly Palace is part of history. Its mission is complete, and there's no need to continue its legacy. I simply don't want to see it decay in the void. Rather than that, it should still contribute in some way. Although you can now control the ancient Heavenly Palace, entering the Scripture Pavilion will still require your own abilities. That place is quite stubborn," the Heavenly Emperor added with a smile. Mandala and the 9 Nether also approached at this moment. The former was slightly surprised upon hearing the Heavenly Emperor's words, then silently nodded. Her gaze shifted, clearly lost in thought. "Go ahead," the Heavenly Emperor said, smiling at Mu Chun. "If you are grateful, all I ask is that if the extraterritorial clan ever dares to eye our great 1,000 worlds again, you lend a hand as much as you can." At this point, Mu Chen had no words to say. He could only respectfully accept the Heavenly Emperor's sword with both hands, then bowed deeply to the Heavenly Emperor and solemnly said, "If that day truly comes, I, Mu Chen, will protect it with my life." The extraterritorial clan was the greatest enemy of all life in the great thousand worlds if that day ever arrived. Even without the Heavenly Emperor's request, Mu Chen would step forward. After all, when the nest is overturned, no egg remains intact. If the great thousand worlds were to be invaded, the only fate left would be annihilation. The Heavenly Emperor nodded and reminded, "This Heavenly Emperor's sword has been with me for many years. The energy I bestowed upon you during the previous baptism has already depleted most of its power. What remains may allow you to activate it 2 or 3 more times. So, unless it is absolutely necessary, do not use it. Should you one day ascend to the Heavenly Supreme Realm, you may be able to reforge it." Mu Chen nodded in response. The Heavenly Emperor's sword was a weapon of immeasurable power. Its level certainly surpassed that of high-grade sacred artifacts, reaching the level of a super-grade sacred artifact. Even though its energy was greatly depleted, the residual power was likely still a formidable threat, even for those in the Upper Earth Supreme Realm. As for one chi transforms 3 purities, the Heavenly Emperor continued, "You've just begun cultivating it, but you are still only at the first step. This divine ability has 3 stages, 3 divisions realm, 3 merges realm, and 3 divine realms. At this moment, you've merely reached the threshold of the 3 divisions realm that if one day you manage to merge the 2 incarnations back into yourself, you will reach the 3 merges realm that at that point, the 3 will merge as 1, and the resulting power will be terrifying. As for the final stage, the 3 divine realms, even I only vaguely grasped it back in the day, so you will have to comprehend it on your own." Mu Chen couldn't help but click his tongue in admiration. One chi transforms 3 purities was indeed an extraordinary divine ability. The process of merging and separating was so profound that it was beyond imagination. He couldn't help but wonder how powerful the 3 divine realms truly were. Though one chi transforms 3 purities is mysterious, don't neglect your other cultivation, the Heavenly Emperor said with a smile. Your immortal golden body is also extraordinary. However, your understanding of it is still too shallow. The Heavenly Emperor glanced at the purple golden shadow behind Mu Chen and smiled faintly, saying, "The immortal golden body is born with 3 divine abilities. One of them is the immortal divine runes, which you've already started to explore. These divine runes, born from immortal power, can change infinitely and are indestructible. Their sharpness rivals that of true sacred artifacts. However, you've only just mastered them. Back in my day, I could condense 999 immortal divine runes. The power of that, even high-grade sacred artifacts would struggle to match." Mu Chen was stunned. He had struggled to condense just 2 immortal divine runes. So hearing that the Heavenly Emperor could condense 999 was truly astonishing. The second divine ability is the Immortal Lotus. The third divine ability is the Immortal Life and Death Transformation. These 2 abilities depend on your understanding and exploration of the immortal golden body. Even I cannot help you with them. Immortal Lotus. Immortal Life and Death Transformation. Mu Chen murmured to himself, then smiled lightly that if he needed the Heavenly Emperor's help for everything, then he would be a terribly unsuccessful heir. He believed in himself and trusted that, one day, he would be able to comprehend these 2 abilities and fully unlock the power of the immortal golden body. But then, as he thought about the immortal golden body, a thought struck him. After a brief hesitation, he finally asked, "I wonder, how can I make the immortal golden body reach its final evolution?" The final evolution of the immortal golden body was none other than one of the 5 remaining primordial law bodies in the great thousand worlds, the eternal undying body. The Heavenly Emperor paused at this point. His gaze grew deep as he fell silent for a moment, before slowly saying, "If one day you perfect the immortal golden body and have ambition, then go to the Mohancient clan. They are the guardians of the eternal undying body. However, the Mohancient clan is one of the oldest races in the great thousand worlds, on par with the Futu ancient clan and other ancient tribes. Their foundation is immeasurable. So, If you wish to obtain the eternal undying body, at the very least, you must reach the heavenly supreme realm. The Mo ancient clan. Mu Chen's heart was surging with emotions. However, when he heard another name, his heart suddenly jolted, and an inexplicable emotion surged within him. Futu, ancient clan. Mu Chen's palm slowly brushed across his chest. He remembered that the cultivation technique left to him by his mother was called the Great Futu Art. Futu, ancient clan. These 4 words rang in Mu Chen's ears, stirring waves in his heart. His expression became somewhat complex, as he vaguely felt that the great Futu art he practiced must have a strong connection with this so-called Futu ancient clan. If his guess was correct, it meant that the culprits who had trapped his mother and kept their family apart were this Futu ancient clan. At this point, he finally understood why his mother, despite being a grandmaster of spirit arrays and having strength on par with the heavenly supreme, still had to leave him, who was just an infant, to protect their father-son duo. Although Mu Chen didn't know much about the Futu ancient clan, he was very clear on one thing. Being one of the oldest races in the Great Thousand Worlds, their power was terrifying beyond imagination. Facing such a force, even an ordinary heavenly supreme would have to tread carefully. No wonder Mother told me to conceal the great Futu art as much as possible. She must have been worried that the Futu ancient clan would detect it. With their power, if they found out, it would become a great threat to me. Mu Chen tightly pressed his lips together. Because of this, over the years, Mu Chen had hardly practiced the great Futu art, hiding it deep within him to avoid being recognized and bringing disaster upon himself. Now, he couldn't help his mother, but he didn't want his recklessness to cause unnecessary trouble for her. The Heavenly Emperor saw Mu Chen's shifting expression and thought he was anxious about having to go to the Mo ancient clan to obtain the eternal undying body. That he chuckled and said, "Don't worry too much. While the Mo ancient clan guards the eternal undying body, they don't actually have the authority to control it. That original law body will choose its own master, and even the Mo ancient clan can do nothing about it. If you really have that confidence, you can try for it. Of course, you must have enough strength. Otherwise, it's better to stay away from the Mo ancient clan." The Heavenly Emperor's tone became somewhat serious at this point. Mu Chen silently nodded. He wasn't a fool. The eternal undying body was so rare and precious. It was clear that the Mo ancient clan would treat it as a treasure. While they were the guardians, they would likely covet it if one of their own clan members obtained it. That would be one thing. But if someone from an outside clan tried to take it, it would undoubtedly cause complications. And such complications could only be handled with sufficient strength. Didn't you try to cultivate the eternal undying body, Senior? Mu Chen suddenly recalled something and asked curiously. Since the Heavenly Emperor had cultivated the immortal golden body, he should also have the qualifications to try for the eternal undying body. Although the Mo ancient clan was powerful, the Heavenly Emperor and the ancient Heavenly Palace were no slouches either. If the Heavenly Emperor could try for the eternal undying body, it would be no surprise. The Heavenly Emperor smiled and shook his head, slightly regretful. "I did think about it, but unfortunately, in my time, the eternal undying body already had a master, so I could only watch and envy." Oh, Mu Chen was shocked. Even someone as mighty as the Heavenly Emperor couldn't obtain the eternal undying body. Who was the person who had cultivated the original law body back then? And they even made the Heavenly Emperor willingly give up the competition. That person was something else. Back then, he was one of the peak existences in the Great Thousand Worlds. Even I had to admit that he was a step ahead of me. Otherwise, I would have tried for the eternal undying body myself. After all, if I had succeeded, I'm sure that even the 9 Corpses Heavenly Demon Emperor wouldn't have been able to force my downfall. The Heavenly Emperor chuckled, his expression showing a hint of admiration for the person. And for someone who could earn the Heavenly Emperor's admiration, that person had to be an extraordinary existence. Mu Chen couldn't help but look intrigued and asked, "Who was that, Senior?" At that time, the Great Thousand Worlds all referred to him as the Immortal Emperor. He was one of the leaders who resisted the extraterritorial clan, and he once single-handedly stood against several of the top 10 Heavenly Demon Emperors of the extraterritorial clan, said the Heavenly Emperor. Immortal Emperor. Mu Chen murmured the ancient-sounding title. Clearly, This title must have come from the eternal undying body, which should have been the foundation of that immortal emperor's existence. Upon this thought, Mu Chen's anticipation for the eternal undying body grew even more. That step is still far away for you. The right path now is to focus on refining the immortal golden body to its utmost potential, the heavenly emperor said, noticing Mu Chen's expectations. Mu Chen respectfully nodded. He was not someone who aimed too high. While he longed for the eternal undying body deep down, he was well aware that the path had to be walked step by step. Even if the eternal undying body were placed before him now, he probably wouldn't be able to cultivate it with his current abilities. After speaking so much to Mu Chen, the already somewhat ethereal figure of the heavenly emperor grew even more transparent, causing Mu Chen's expression to turn dim. It was clear that the heavenly emperor could no longer hold on. The last spiritual trace he left in this world was about to dissipate. Mandala, standing beside them, also fell silent, her small face full of sorrow. Seeing their expressions, the heavenly emperor smiled freely and then affectionately ruffled Mandala's head, saying, Mu Chen has extraordinary potential. If you ever need to protect him, do your best to assist. Mandala nodded gently. The heavenly emperor then looked at Mu Chen and said, Mandala was raised by me, and I regard her as my own daughter. Since you've received my inheritance, in a certain sense, you should call her junior sister. Mu Chen, hearing this, couldn't help but feel a bit awkward. After all, Mandala's image as a little girl made it difficult for him to say the words. However, he also understood that the heavenly emperor was entrusting Mandala to him. He immediately nodded, smiled at Mandala, and said, Junior sister, please take good care of me in the future. Mandala, who had been feeling sorrowful, smiled faintly at Mu Chen's address, her small lips curling into a grin. She playfully rolled her eyes at him, and her previously sad mood was somewhat alleviated. Seeing this, the heavenly emperor nodded in satisfaction. He knew that Mandala had a solitary nature and rarely had friends. However, it was clear that there was a deep trust between Mu Chen and Mandala. While Mu Chen was still somewhat weak now, the heavenly emperor believed that this young man would grow into a powerful figure, and when the time came, he would surely be able to protect Mandala. Though the Great Thousand Worlds is currently calm, the extraterritorial clan still watches closely. This mysterious race seems to come from nowhere. In my sense, their last invasion was grand, but it still felt like they had more strength left. Therefore, if they strike again, it will certainly be a force of destruction. Whether or not the Great Thousand Worlds can survive will depend on you all. The heavenly emperor sighed and admonished once more that Mu Chen, Mandala, and Nine Nether all nodded. Quietly, seeing this, the heavenly emperor no longer spoke. His body grew even more transparent, and eventually, he transformed into countless specks of light, drifting away and dissolving into the heavenly river, vanishing completely. The three of them watched as the heavenly emperor disappeared, remaining silent for a long time. The atmosphere grew heavy and oppressive. After a long period of silence, Mandala finally composed her small face and looked at Mu Chen, saying, Let's go. Mu Chen nodded, then asked, What about the ancient heavenly palace? The ancient heavenly palace was a territory built by the heavenly emperor over many years that provided ideal cultivation conditions, and if it could be utilized, it would offer countless benefits to any faction. Mandala pondered for a moment and said, For now, we should relocate the ancient heavenly palace to the Great Luo Heaven domain, but we first need to fully consolidate the Northern Realm Alliance. Mu Chen nodded silently. The Northern Realm Alliance was still somewhat scattered. If the ancient heavenly palace were introduced now, it could cause problems, so consolidation was inevitable. Mandala, once a lower Earth Supreme, would have faced resistance in forcing such an integration. But now, having reached the perfect Earth Supreme, and with Mu Chen having entered the lower Earth Supreme as well, coupled with the one Chi transforms 3 purities, he was likely now the second most powerful person in the Northern Realm, after Mandala. With these trump cards in hand, even if the top forces from the Northern Domain try to resist, they will still be able to forcefully suppress them. After the decision was made, Mu Chen first nodded slightly at the 2 avatars beside him. The 2 avatars smiled, and then turned into 2 beams of light, directly plunging into the heavenly river, sinking to its depths. Gradually, They closed their eyes to meditate, clearly intending to use the power of the heavenly river to stabilize themselves. As the two avatars meditated, Chen was still able to sense the connection between them. Whenever he needed it, as long as he concentrated his mind, no matter the distance, the two avatars could instantly reach Chen's side, thanks to their mental connection. After sending the two avatars into the heavenly river, Chen nodded toward Mandala. She then waved her hand, and space was immediately torn apart. Opening a spatial rift in front of the three of them, Chen stepped in first, with Juyo following right behind him. Mandala, the last to enter, took one final glance at the heavenly river below. A single tear fell from her eye as she turned and stepped into the rift. As the spatial rift slowly dissipated, the heavenly river also returned to its calm state. The only sound that remained was the soft, rolling water as the waves continued to crash. The events surrounding the ancient heavenly palace caused a tremendous stir on the Tianluo continent with the return of many top experts. After all, whether it was the resurrection of the Demon Emperor or the appearance of the two peak experts, the Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor, they were all capable of creating a terrifying impact at the beginning. No one expected that the opening of the heavenly palace would lead to such a disaster. If it weren't for the timely arrival of the Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor, and had the Demon Emperor managed to escape, the first to suffer would have likely been the Tianluo continent. A Demon Emperor, comparable to the Heavenly Supreme, would be capable of massacring with ease, and if that happened, the Tianluo continent could instantly become a hell on earth. The mere thought of that scene sent chills down one's spine. Fortunately, that terrifying scene never came to pass. The intervention of the Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor eradicated all of the Demon Emperor's vitality, saving the Tianluo continent from the brink of destruction. This event spread quickly, and the reputations of the Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor soared, with even greater admiration from the masses. However, while the entire Tianluo continent was revering and thanking the Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor, the Sacred Demon Palace quickly became the target of everyone's scorn. Those former powerhouses once aligned with the Sacred Demon Palace, like rats crossing the street, began to defect in droves, no longer daring to associate themselves with the Sacred Demon Palace. After all, in the current Great Thousand Worlds, any connection with extraterritorial clans was an unforgivable crime. Liu Heng, who not only collaborated but also attempted to resurrect the Demon Emperor, was considered utterly despicable and ruthless to the extreme. As a result, the once powerful Sacred Demon Palace was shattered into pieces in a matter of days. Many of the forces that once occupied territories around the Sacred Demon Palace quickly bared their fangs and swiftly divided up its land, causing the mighty Sacred Demon Palace to become nothing more than a thing of the past on the Tianluo continent. By the time Chen and the others emerged from the ancient heavenly palace, the Sacred Demon Palace had already been devoured completely. This left them somewhat regretful, as the Sacred Demon Palace had great foundations. If they had absorbed it, it could have greatly strengthened the Northern Realm Alliance. However, this thought quickly faded from their minds. After all, they still had the ancient heavenly palace, which was the true treasure that would make the Great Luo Heaven Domain exponentially more powerful. Upon returning to the Great Luo Heaven Domain, Mandala didn't let Chen become distracted by other matters. Instead, she immediately instructed him to go into seclusion for a period of time. Although Chen had broken through to the lower Earth Supreme Realm, it had been a rushed breakthrough, and he had not fully grasped the power of his new realm. Therefore, the priority was to stabilize his foundation and avoid leaving behind any future troubles. Chen had no objections to Mandala's plan, that he knew that while this breakthrough had been an incredible opportunity, it had also been a bit rushed. Had his previous foundation not been solid enough, such a breakthrough could have been more of a curse than a blessing in the long run. So, after everything had settled, his first priority was to solidify his current state and fully master the power of the lower Earth Supreme Realm. For nearly a month, Chen spent his time in seclusion, diligently refining his strength. During his secluded cultivation, Chen frequently harnessed the power of the Heavenly Emperor's sword to enter the ancient Heavenly Palace. At this point, he had essentially become its master, and the once formidable spirit arrays within no longer posed any hindrance to him that he could traverse the entire space freely. Amid his explorations, he made a surprising discovery. Unexpected benefits hidden within the palace. The first and most astonishing find was a set of fragmented scrolls containing the blueprint of a spirit array, none other than the 9 dragons devouring immortal array. This was the same array Chen had previously studied, though he had only obtained an incomplete version. With that fragment, he had barely managed to construct a rudimentary form of the array, which could summon only 3 giant dragons, merely a third of its full power. Even in this incomplete state, the 9 dragons devouring immortal array was powerful enough to contend with a lower Earth Supreme. This was because the array was at the pinnacle of the intermediate Grandmaster Spirit Array level. If it could be fully restored and perfectly deployed, even an upper Earth Supreme would struggle to escape its grasp. For Chen, this was an incredible windfall. He had long coveted the 9 dragons devouring immortal array, but the lack of a complete diagram had been a lingering regret at this advanced level. Acquiring such a formation was nearly impossible. Even with Mandala's help, the fact that he had stumbled upon it by sheer luck left him elated. Thus, during his secluded cultivation, he devoted a significant portion of his efforts to deciphering and mastering the newly acquired formation in hopes of wielding its full power. Of course, even with Chen's current capabilities, executing a fully realized 9 dragons devouring immortal array would still require refinement. However, with a complete formation diagram in hand, any future attempts would undoubtedly surpass his previous efforts. Emboldened by his success, Chen continued to scour the ancient heavenly palace, determined to uncover more hidden treasures. His persistence paid off. He stumbled upon something even more astonishing. It was, in fact, an army. This force belonged to the first Hall Master and was one of his most elite troops, known as the Demon Subduing Guards. Within the ancient heavenly palace's prime, their strength had even surpassed that of the Soul Slaughtering Guards. Historical records indicated that when the extraterritorial clan invaded the ancient heavenly palace, the Demon Subduing Guards had been instrumental in resisting their assault. Naturally, the main force of the Demon Subduing Guards had perished in that devastating battle. However, some fallen warriors had activated a secret technique before their demise, transforming themselves into puppet warriors to preserve their combat strength. Chen found them buried deep beneath the ocean, within the domain of the first Hall Master. Hidden beneath thick layers of silt, he unearthed nearly 1,000 black stone statues, each containing the remnants of these warriors. Ordinarily, controlling the Demon Subduing Guards would require the first Hall Master's military token, but that artifact had long been destroyed, making it impossible to retrieve. Fortunately, Chen possessed something far superior to a mere military token: the Heavenly Emperor's Sword. Though the Demon Subduing Guards had once served the first Hall Master, their ultimate allegiance was to the Heavenly Emperor. The moment Chen unsheathed the Heavenly Emperor's sword, the residual resistance from the Demon Subduing Guards vanished instantly, and they fell completely under his command. With this stroke of fortune, Chen had not only acquired the complete formation diagram of the 9 dragons devouring immortal array, but also gained command over an army stronger than the Soul Slaughtering Guards. Even he found himself somewhat overwhelmed by the sheer magnitude of his gains. However, his sharp instincts warned him that this was all too convenient. Whether it was the array diagram or the Demon Subduing Guards, both had been concealed far too well for him to have discovered them so easily. It felt as though an unseen force was deliberately guiding him to it present. The ancient heavenly palace was devoid of any living beings besides Chen. Yet, there remained one observer: the scripture pavilion of the ancient heavenly palace. This pavilion was shrouded in mystery, and even with Chen's current lower Earth Supreme strength, he still couldn't detect its presence. However, it was evidently possessed of a profound intelligence. Perhaps all these coincidences were its way of offering goodwill, an acknowledgement of Chen as the new master of the ancient heavenly palace. Chen ultimately cupped his fists toward the void of the ancient heavenly palace, offering a salute as a gesture of gratitude for the gift from the scripture pavilion. However, just as he was reveling in the joy of his 2 newfound gains, he received a message from Mandala, instructing him to end his seclusion and head to Great Luo Heaven for an important discussion. ##### Great Luo Heaven. When Chen arrived at the Grand Hall, he was surprised to find that not only was Mandala present, but also 5 Lower Earth Supremes, including the Sage of 10,000 Saints, Lu Tiandao, and the Demon Emperor, who were all key figures of the Northern Realm Alliance. As Chen entered, the 5 once dominant powerhouses of the Northern Domain gave him slight nods in acknowledgement. If it had been in the past, with their status and strength, they would never have spared him a second glance. But things were different now. Since emerging from the ancient heavenly palace, Chen had directly broken through to the lower Earth Supreme level, standing on equal footing with them. At this level, he had earned the right to be treated as an equal, and none of them dared to act superior anymore. Chen returned their nods before taking a seat beside Mandala. Behind him stood the elders of the Great Luo Heaven Domain, including the Sleeping King. However, at this moment, they could only take seats. Behind him, acknowledging his newfound status, Mandala, seeing Chen's arrival, gave a slight nod before turning her gaze toward Lu Tiandao and the others. Her voice was calm as she said, "You all should already know why I've summoned you here. We have gained control over the ancient heavenly palace, and from now on, we will establish a connection with it to serve as our foundation." Lu Tiandao and the others had clearly been informed of this beforehand. Although they were still in awe, they maintained their composure. More than anything, they were filled with excitement. They all understood just how extraordinary the ancient heavenly palace was. If they could establish a direct link to it, even their own cultivation would progress with much greater ease. Although we have formed the Northern Realm Alliance, it remains too loose, with everyone still acting independently. I plan to restructure it into a unified force. If you choose to join, you must abandon your previous sects and factions, bring your disciples, and truly integrate. Mandala's dark eyes swept over them as she spoke, her voice steady but firm. Lu Tiandao and the other 5 Lower Earth Supremes stiffened slightly, hesitation flashing in their eyes. That Mandala's words made it clear that she intended to fully consolidate the Northern Realm, which meant that if they joined, they would no longer be their own masters. Instead, they would have to submit to a true ruler. This was not an easy transition for them. In the past, they had reigned supreme within their own sects. But now they were being asked to bow to someone else. The idea was unsettling. Had Mandala proposed this before, they would have undoubtedly joined forces to oppose her. However, things were different now. Mandala had already stepped into the perfect Earth Supreme level, far surpassing them in strength. Moreover, Great Luo Heaven now had another newly ascended Lower Earth Supreme, Chen. They had to admit that, even if they joined forces, they were no longer capable of resisting Great Luo Heaven Domain. If anyone refuses, then leave the Northern Domain. Mandala's tone remained indifferent, but her words carried undeniable authority. Even the 5 Lower Earth Supremes did not show anger, for they knew that she had every right to say such a thing. After a long silence, they finally nodded one after another and said in unison, "We are willing to join." Mandala had reached the perfect Earth Supreme level, placing her among the very top figures in the entire Tianluo continent. With her protection, their safety was guaranteed. Furthermore, their status in the continent would rise dramatically, elevating them far beyond their previous roles as mere regional overlords of the Northern Domain. Moreover, with Mandala and her people now in control of the ancient heavenly palace, it would serve as an unparalleled training ground. In time, their newly formed faction could very well grow into a supreme force in the Great Thousand Worlds. By then, as founding elders, their status would be incomparable to what it was now. After weighing their options, all 5 Lower Earth Supremes chose to comply. Seeing this, Mandala remained unfazed, as though she had expected this outcome. However, she had not gathered them here just for this matter. With a slight smile, she continued, "Since no one has any objections, I shall now announce the leader of our newly established force, Chen." The moment those words were spoken, the Grand Hall fell into complete silence. Even Chen's eyes widened in shock as he stared at Mandala, utterly dumbfounded. What kind of move was this now? Inside the Grand Hall, the air remained still. Lu Tiandao, the Lord of the Netherworld Palace, and the other 5 Lower Earth Supremes were all visibly taken aback. Their gazes flickered as they processed this unexpected turn of events. None of them had anticipated that the leader of this newly established force would be Chen. Had it been Mandala taking this position, they wouldn't have had the slightest objection. After all, her perfect Earth Supreme strength was enough to suppress them completely. But Chen, what merit or capability did he have? While Chen had indeed stepped into the ranks of the Lower Earth Supremes, in the eyes of old powerhouses like Lu Tiandao, there was still a lingering sense of seniority and condescension. Just 2 months ago, they had regarded Chen with nothing more than a downward glance, because he simply wasn't on their level. Though his breakthrough to Earth Supreme had tempered that arrogance somewhat, it was impossible to erase it entirely overnight. Thus, when they heard Mandala declare Chen as their superior, their expressions immediately soured. If word of this got out, it would be utterly humiliating. The outside world would scoff at the notion that 5 veterans of the Northern Domain had to bow before a mere youth. That was simply disgraceful. But so, after Mandala's pronouncement, the Grand Hall remained silent. An awkward atmosphere took hold as Lu Tiandao and the others, though not daring to openly oppose Mandala, clearly expressed their discontent through their silence. Chen, too, felt a bit embarrassed. He hadn't expected Mandala to pull such a move. Like everyone else, even he had assumed that only Mandala was qualified to take on the role of leader. With no other choice, he turned to Mandala, hoping she would reconsider, but she remained unmoved. Then, in the next moment, a voice wrapped in spiritual energy echoed directly into his ears. "You must hold this position." Chen's brow twitched as he responded in the same manner. "Why?" Mandala's eyes gleamed. "Do you plan to march into the Luo God clan alone?" Chen's gaze snapped up in surprise. He hadn't expected her to know of his intent to go to the Luo God clan, let alone be aware of his relationship with Luo Li. He instinctively glanced at Nine Nether, who gave him a barely perceptible nod, confirming that she had told Mandala everything. Understanding the reason behind Mandala's actions, Chen let out a bitter chuckle, though a warmth spread in his heart. So she was doing this for him. While you were in seclusion, I used all my resources to gather intelligence on the Western Heaven Realm, including details on your little lover and the current state of the Luo God clan, Mandala continued. I'll share that information with you later. But for now, you need to understand one thing. Even though you've stepped into the rank of Lower Earth Supreme, you alone still won't be enough to change the situation there. The predicament your little lover faces isn't something you can resolve single-handedly. Chen's heart clenched at those words. A sharp light flashed in his eyes, accompanied by a wave of simmering anger. Deep within, a pang of heartache struck him. Though he had long been in the dark about the Western Heaven Realm, he could easily imagine the immense pressure Luo Li must be enduring within the turbulent Luo God clan. Even for a strong-willed man, such a situation could be overwhelming, let alone a girl like her. Over the years, he had survived countless life and death struggles, but Luo Li had surely faced her own tribulations within the Luo God clan. The thought of it made his blood boil with fury. Right now, all he wanted was to rush to her side and tear apart anyone who had dared to make her suffer. A murderous intent surged in Chen's eyes as his fists clenched tightly, his knuckles cracking from the pressure. Mandala observed him calmly before speaking once more through spiritual transmission. So, if you truly wish to help her, you can't go alone. You need a force under your command, one that follows you without question. Chen fell silent, not arguing this time. Although he had entered the Earth Supreme Realm, he was still not at the level where he could dominate without resistance. A Lower Earth Supreme. He was indeed a superpower, but in the Western Heaven Realm, there were the 4 divine clans, all of which had deep foundations. Therefore, although he might be able to help Luo Li, it was unlikely that he could resolve her predicament alone. However, if what Mandala said was true, and he had built a team that respected him, then the power he wielded would far exceed his OWNIT. That point, anyone who wanted to harm Luo Li would have to think twice. Now, do you still plan to refuse? Mandala asked. Chen tightly pressed his lips together. After a long while, he finally spoke. But, the Great Luo Heaven Domain was created by you, and the Northern Realm Alliance was built by you. If a new force were to be established, the Northern Realm Alliance would have to be involved, and even Mandala would need to be part of it. But all of this was originally meant for Mandala. Now, Mandala was handing over the foundation she had worked so hard to build. How could Chen feel at ease about that? You are the heir of the Heavenly Emperor. Just think of me doing this to prevent the ancient Heavenly Palace from being completely severed. Mandala responded indifferently to In fact, from the very beginning, she had never been interested in controlling a faction. When she founded the Great Luo Heaven Domain, the primary reason was simply to have a stable place to secretly cultivate and heal, and to take revenge on Lu Hong. Now that Lu Hong was dead and the Heavenly Emperor had completely dissipated, she had no interest in such matters anymore. If it hadn't been for the Heavenly Emperor's request to take care of Chen before he disappeared, she might have felt aimless by now. For her, those foundations were meaningless. In the end, nothing could compare to Chen's importance. After all, over the years, Chen was the only person who had gained her recognition and trust, and Chen felt the emotion in Mandala's voice. His expression became complicated. If it weren't for Luo Li, with his personality, he would never have accepted Mandala's offer. However, Mandala's words had indeed struck a chord with him, and he found he could not refuse. Thank you. Chen slowly closed his eyes and whispered to Mandala. He knew that he owed her a great debt of gratitude, but it felt insincere to say much more at the moment. All he could do was simply express his thanks. Seeing that Chen had finally nodded, a rare smile appeared on Mandala's exquisite face. Then, her teasing voice once again reached Chen's ears. Since you've agreed, the next problem is for you to solve on your own. Chen was stunned. What problem? Mandala propped up her chin with her little hand and smiled as she transmitted her voice. Do you think those people will easily respect you? If you don't want this new force to fall apart quickly, you need them to be willing. This is something I can't help with. If you force it, they'll probably harbor resentment. So, whether you can intimidate these old ghosts depends on your own abilities. Chen slowly opened his eyes, a faint smile forming as he nodded lightly at Mandala. He knew that her pushing him forward was the final help she could offer. Whether or not these old ghosts would accept him now depended on his own capabilities. 2 months ago, Chen would have been forced to back down in the face of the true Earth Supremes. No matter how many tricks he had, he could not be on equal footing with them. But now, things were different. He was now a genuine lower Earth Supreme. Perhaps he was newly ascended, but if these old ghosts thought they could suppress him simply by relying on their seniority, they were being naive. Before reaching the Earth Supreme realm, he had already forced Elder Zhua to retreat in embarrassment. How could these old ghosts expect to treat him lightly now? With this thought in mind, Chen's posture gradually straightened, and the hesitation he had earlier disappeared. A sharp gleam appeared between his brows, and an invisible aura began to envelop the entire Grand Hall. What did it matter if there were 5 lower Earth Supremes? What did it matter if they were senior? Chen had already changed. These 5 old ghosts still wanted to look down on him as they had in the past. They were just fooling themselves. And this change in Chen was, of course, immediately noticed by Lu Tiandao, Sage of 10,000 Saints, Lord of the Netherworld Palace, and the other 3 lower-level Earth Supremes. Their brows couldn't help but raise in unison as they exchanged a glance, their eyes flashing. From the looks of it, it seemed that Chen truly had the ambition to surpass them, didn't he? What an arrogant little brat. The 5 of them wore blank expressions, but in their hearts, they all let out a cold snort in unison. Although they had no temper when facing Mandala, they clearly still held a sense of superiority over Chen. Clink! A heavy sound of a teacup falling onto the table suddenly echoed in the quiet hall. The strong figures from the Great Luo Heaven Domain, such as Nine Nether, Sleeping King, and Heavenly Vulture Emperor, all turned to look. They saw Lu Tiandao, with a calm expression, placing his teacup down. Among the 5 lower-level Earth Supremes, it was clear that Lu Tiandao had the deepest grudge with Chen. Although things had softened over time, he still found it hardest to accept the fact that Chen was now above him. Thus, the Lord of Xintian Palace looked at Mandala and spoke slowly in a low voice. I completely agree with what the Alliance leader said earlier. However, if the leader of this new force is to be you, I have no objections at all. But if we are to treat Mu Chun as our superior, Lu Tiandao raised his eyelids and turned his gaze toward Mu Chun, his voice suddenly turning cold. To put it bluntly, I'm afraid he doesn't have the qualifications yet.